Welcome back to the channel, you nerds. I'm tired. I haven't gotten much sleep in the last couple days because work, content, annual, there's just a lot going on. So I do want to preface that with this episode that I'm a little groggy, but we're going to work our way through it. All right. It's Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. It's in plain English. We're going to understand it. We're going to break it down Barney style for you so that you can get all the information you need out of the PHAK in a manner that works for you. I remember when I was a student pilot and I was trying to read the PHAK, I was sitting there with like tape or something, like holding my eyeballs open. I'm just like, I need to read this book. I need all the information out of this book. I can't. Right. So I'm hoping that this series helps you not have to go through that. Right now, I know those first few episodes, they might have been a little bit of a drudge. They might have been like trying to run through molasses or something like that. But what they did do is they set up the foundation that you need to continue on with your training, right? The way that I teach, the way that PHAK is written is a building block style approach to education, not just aviation, right? We need to set a nice foundation, all right? We need to set the ground layer. And then we're going to build on top of that, right? We can't jump straight into steep turns if we don't know how an airplane's put together. We can't jump straight into 8s on pylons if we don't understand the aerodynamics at play. And we can't do aerodynamics and how airplanes are built unless we understand how the FAA is going to yell at us. We need to know the rules and understand the role of the FAA, right? And that's what we covered in those first few episodes. So if you're new here and you haven't watched those, you haven't gotten that information, go back. Watch those episodes. I promise you won't regret it. I'll try to link the whole little playlist up here somewhere. It's probably down there somewhere, like down in the little doobie dangle. But before we get into this episode, I do want to give a huge shout out to all of y'all who have already been watching and enjoy this content. And there was a really good comment on the aeronautical decision making video. The commenter really just asked, how do you mesh the systematic approach of aeronautical decision-making and the possible drastically changing environment of aviation when it comes to things like emergencies, fires, engine failures, etc. And what I want to talk about is the miracle on the Hudson. I want to use that as an example of how we mesh the systematic approach and a rapidly changing environment. So the miracle on the Hudson, Sully, dual engine failure, low altitude, leaving New York, right? Geese went through the engines. And Sully, the captain, he didn't follow SOP or standard operating procedures. He didn't follow the checklist, or he didn't follow the order of the checklist and the QRH that was associated with the dual engine failure. He went out of order and he started the auxiliary power unit. Now, for those of you who don't understand, the auxiliary power unit is really just an engine that sits in the tail of the airplane that powers things like, well, the electrical system and hydraulics. And well, Airbus is fly-by-wire and it doesn't really fly. Like the control surfaces don't work if you don't have generators and you don't have hydraulics. Well, when he lost both engines, he lost exactly that. Now there is a ram air turbine that's supposed to help you out, but it doesn't work at certain speeds, and there's a whole lot more that goes into it. And this isn't a systems on the Airbus class, so don't roast me in the comments about getting something wrong. But Sully didn't follow what you might think is the systematic approach, the tools and resources that are there to help you handle emergencies. And while it's true he didn't follow the checklist, while it's true he didn't follow the QRH, while it's true he didn't follow the SOP, he used his experience, his training, and his understanding of the systems at play to prioritize critical actions, right? Starting the APU was on the checklist. It was just a lot farther down the checklist. So he prioritized getting the APU, or the auxiliary power unit, up so that he could, well, get his control surfaces back, so that he could get hydraulics and electrics back in this aircraft, so that he could then, well, miraculously land it on the Hudson. So it wasn't he wasn't throwing out the systematic approach. The systematic approach started at day one when he started his Airbus training. It started at day one when he started as a student pilot way, way back, where his instructor said, hey, we need to learn about systems so that we understand how our airplane functions so that we can handle emergencies that don't necessarily fall exactly within the realm of these checklists or these procedures. So the systematic approach isn't always, hey, should I go fly today? Sometimes it's, hey, I should study systems. Sometimes it's, hey, I should probably make more flashcards. Hey, I don't understand this as well as I should. And that's that risk mitigation. Because the risk, right, the threat is possibility of a dual engine failure at low altitude. How do we mitigate that risk? Well, we mitigate that risk or that threat by studying our system so that we understand that starting the APU is going to give me control of my aircraft so that I can put it in the Hudson and save everybody on board. So awesome comment, awesome question. Keep them coming. We're always learning. And if I get something wrong, absolutely roast me in the comments because we're gonna make a whole lot of fun of it. Sound good? So let's get into today's episode though. All right, today's episode, we're gonna be talking about aircraft certification, design, and airworthiness. So when it comes to the FAA, they've got 3 really big ticket items that they certify, okay? So you've got airframes. This is the whole airplane, okay? This is the wings, the ailerons, the rudder, the tail, the elevator, the horizontal stabilizer, the vertical stabilizer, the fuselage, the windshields, all that jazz. Then you got the engines. This is the power plant. This is thinking like Continental, Lycoming, Rotax, Delta Hawks, etc., CFMs, Rolls-Royce, all those engines that, push you along through the air. And then you've got the props, the spinny bits that will chop you up if you get too close. Make sure when someone yells, clear prop, you actually clear the prop. All right. Each component must comply with really detailed regulations under Title 14 code, CFR, blah, 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 under the FARs. Okay. Compliance really isn't a box checking exercise. There is some very thorough engineering and testing and documentation to ensure that your aircraft isn't going to come apart midair or kill somebody. Now, when it comes to certifying an airplane or any aircraft for that matter, there's different parts based on what that aircraft's mission is. So for normal utility, acrobatic, and commuter airplanes, think your Cessnas, your Bonanzas, your extra 330s, your Piper Cubs, whatnot. This is going to be under Part 23. And these are your trainer airplanes. These are your airplanes that doctors buy to get them from point A to point B. Then you've got Part 25. This is what's going to cover transport category airplanes. Think CRJ 700, think Airbus A320, 319s, Boeing 737. Then you got Part 27. This covers rotorcrafts, small rotorcrafts, things like the R22, the R44. Then you've got transport category rotorcraft that are going to fall under Part 29. Hot air balloons or manned balloons are going to fall under Part 31. Engines are going to fall under Part 33, and props are going to fall under Part 35. Aircraft like gliders and unusual prototypes, those are going to get their own airworthiness. They're going to get a special airworthiness certificate, and it's not a loophole to fly an airplane that doesn't fall under these regulations. They're just going to get issued a special airworthiness certificate. So what's the process of getting a design certified, of proving to the FAA that what you're building isn't a death machine, proving to the FAA that it's safe? Well, it's kind of a 6-step process. Okay. First one is concept and preliminary design. Okay. You're going to draw up some blueprints. Hopefully they're detailed, right? And you're really going to decide whether it's going to be a Part 23, Part 25, 27, etc. aircraft. Then you're going to apply to the FAA for a type certificate. It's going to be Form 8110-12, and this begins the official coordination with the FAA. There's the establishment of certification basis, right? The FAA and the applicant, right? Let's say it's me and you, we're designing an airplane. Agree on the applicable regulations. This is, again, called the certification basis. So, for example, a normal category airplane is going to fall under Part 23. So we, me, you, and the FAA all agree that it's a Part 23 airplane. Now, If for some reason the FAA is like, no, this is definitely a Part 25 airplane, or wait a minute, this thing's got a bag and a burner and whatnot. This thing's definitely not an airplane. This is a balloon. Okay. Then there's the compliance planning and agreement, right? A project specification certification plan, or the PSCP, is created, and it outlines which standard will be used, right? So Part 23, Part 25, et cetera. How compliance will be shown. Is it going to be analysis, simulation, ground testing, flight testing, or a combination of all of them? And timeline for all phases. When are we going to get this done by? It's going to be 3 months, 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, absolutely never. That's more likely. Step 5. This is going to be the design, analysis, and testing. Right? This is really the meat of the process, and this is where a lot of them are gonna flounder. Think the Sea-Wind 3000. This is where it stopped. That's why it's an experimental airplane. And we'll talk about experimentals in a second. But the applicant builds a prototype. They conduct lab and bench testings, things like structural testing. For example, there's an aircraft manufacturer out there. They're trying to get it certified, I think. But for right now, it's experimental. Their idea, or the way that they tested their wing structure to actually support the G loading that they wanted it to do, is they built the whole wing structure, they skinned it and everything, they supported it by the spar, by the main item that runs through the main wing, that runs through the wing, and then they just started loading up bags of concrete on it. And they eventually got to some astronomical amount of concrete. I forget the exact poundage, but either way, it was like it was the equivalent of 10 Gs. Now, does the FAA agree that that's an appropriate way to test a wing? I have no idea. I'm not the FAA. I think that's good enough, right? You put a bunch of concrete on it and evenly spread out the load, and it was well more than the aircraft could ever weigh, and it was well more than the aircraft could ever survive, and it was more than I could survive. Yeah, I think that's a solid wing structure. But this is eventually going to move into flight test campaigns, and all the results are going to be documented. And often the FAA will send out a designated engineering representative, and they're going to be involved in the review and approval of all the data to ensure that people weren't just pencil whipping data. Okay. Step 6, the FAA review and the issue of the type certificate. All right. Once compliance is demonstrated, the FAA is going to issue the type certificate, and the type certificate data sheet is also published. The type certificate data sheet is going to outline things like your engine and your prop options, weight limits, configuration, etc. It's really the document that tells you what engines are approved, what mods are approved, or what combinations are approved on this airplane. I don't know of many type certificates that show multiple engines. But I'm also not digging through random type certificates. So if you know one, right, put it in the comments. I'd love to learn about it. Now, just because you get a type certificate and a type certificate data sheet doesn't mean you're done. You also have to prove to the FAA that you can do it again, right? That you can build it more than once. So even after getting your type certificate, a manufacturer must apply for a production certificate showing that they can repeatedly produce the aircraft to the same airworthy standard. This is why you don't see Comanches anymore after the Comanche plant burnt down, right? You can't really prove that you can produce that airplane again if the place that you build them doesn't exist anymore. Okay. But it's really to ensure that every aircraft that rolls off the production line can follow the same airworthiness standard that the original prototype that the FAA, tested and approved, meets. So, what happens if we designed this airplane back in the 70s and now it sucks? What do we do now? Well, the type certificate data sheet said that I could only put this dumpy little 150 horsepower engine on it and this dumpy little 68-inch prop. Well, this airplane sucks now. There's modern stuff. There's fuel injection. There's multi-spark ignition systems. There's 80-inch props, constant speed, composite, 3-bladed scimitar, blah, 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 blah. Well, this is where you start looking into supplemental type certificates, okay? Supplemental type certificates is exactly what it sounds like. It's a supplement to the original type certificate, allowing you to replace old vacuum-driven instruments with things like G5s or G275s. Things like adding floats, changing engine and prop combinations, installing long-range fuel tanks. Now, STCs are aircraft specific, and you must verify that your make and model is covered, and any installation must be done according to the STC instructions. Okay, so I've got a couple STCs on my airplane. I've actually got like all but 2 or 3 that are available for the airplane. One of the big ones that I've got on my airplane is the sponson fuel tanks. Now, the sponson fuel tanks, it's exactly what it sounds like. There's fuel tanks in the sponsons now, giving me an extra 14 gallons of fuel that's usable in flight. But what it does do is it gives me a new limitation, right? It expanded my useful load by 100 pounds, but it also told me that I can't use that fuel in the event that the airplane touches the water. So if the airplane lands on the water, hangs out on the water, that fuel out in the sponsons is off limits until I can verify that there's no water in that fuel, which is obviously a good idea, right? Airplanes don't run on water. As much as we would like for airplanes to run on water, it would be so much cheaper. But ensure that you're in compliance with the limitations that are part of your STC. But you need to make sure, again, as I said earlier, that your STC, or that the equipment that you want is applicable to your aircraft, even if it seems reasonable. And for example, I wanted to put the Dynon like 7 or 8 inch displays in my airplane, right? Because they would fit in my airplane. They'd be big enough for what I needed. And it was kind of an all in package deal. It would have made a really clean package. It would have made a really clean panel. So I went and talked to Dynon at Oshkosh, was it last year or the year before? And what I found out is that I'm not on their STC. Like my Lake 200 is not approved on Dynon's 8-inch display or any of their equipment, actually. Like the Lake 200 is not on any of Dynon's STCs, which means no matter how much I want it, no matter how much it would be reasonable, no matter how much it seems like it would be safe, it's not on the STC. I'm not a part of their STC, so not approved. Can't install it. So don't mess up and install like GI 275s in some weird obscure airplane that's not on Garmin's STC. Now you might be wondering, what about experimental aircraft? Right? We've all been talking about certified stuff up until this point. What about experimentals? Right? What about Sonics? What about RV? What about those are the only 2 experimentals like that? What about the long easies? Right? Really, you can build your own airplane technically, right? There's somebody on Instagram, I think it's Airworthy or Airworthy, something or another like that. He's building a Zenith. I think it's a Zenith. I'm pretty sure it's a Zenith. But it's totally legal. Under Part 21, Subpart H, this is what's going to cover experimental amateur built aircraft, or EABs, which make up a massive chunk of the general aviation fleet. If you've been to Oshkosh, the fly-in Oshkosh, you'll see that experimental airplanes, I mean, it's EAA. That's what EAA stands for, is Experimental Aircraft Association. It's all about building your own airplane. The FAA is still going to inspect that aircraft for general safety, but it does not receive a type certificate. You'll get a special airworthiness certificate for the experimental category, and the operating limitations are tailored to your build. Okay. Quick little fun fact. Home builds must meet certain documentation and logbook standards, and many of them fly under test programs for 40 plus hours before passengers are even allowed aboard them. Pretty much the airplane's got to fly around safely for more than 40 hours without any structural damage, without any failures of anything before passengers can even get in them. Now, what about light sports? I know we talked about light sports in the previous episode, but what about light sports? Do they get type certificates? I haven't heard you talk about light sports at all. Well, no. Light sport aircraft technically don't get normal type certificates or airworthiness certificates. So unlike other aircraft, LSAs are not FAA type certified. They're manufactured using ASTM consensus of standards, which the FAA accepts under Part 21.190. Think LSAs as like the Apple stores of airplanes. Sleek, simple, limited. You can fly one as a sport pilot, but they do have some hard limitations. Okay. Their max weight is going to be 1320. If it's a seaplane, it's 1430. Max speed 120 knots. Max seats of 2. No retractable gear unless it's a glider or a seaplane. I think those are the only two exemptions for LSAs. LSAs get a special airworthiness certificate as well, but their maintenance and certifications are less rigorous. Now, why does this matter to you? Why does any of this matter as a pilot, right? You're not a mechanic. You're not designing airplanes. Why does it matter what certification process is? Why does it matter what STCs are, what STCs your airplane has? Well, when you do your pre-flight under part 91.7, you say like, hey, this airplane's airworthy and it's safe, right? I'm going to go fly it. You as the pilot in command are deciding that this airplane meets the applicable requirements. Well, how do you know what those requirements are if you don't know what's on the TCDS? If you don't know what things the STCs might have changed? This knowing everything that we covered in today's episode really puts you ahead of the game when you're flying older airplanes, renting airplanes, flying unfamiliar airplanes. So I wanna pose a little question that you guys can hash out in the comments. Let's say you go to your local FBO. They've got a Cessna 172 for rent. That 172 has the engine instruments, your RPM and whatnot. And when it comes to primary instruments, right, your avionics, all it has is 2 G5s, 2 Garmin G5s. So the top G5 provides you attitude, airspeed, vertical speed, and altitude. The bottom G5 provides you heading, course, and I think it'll even give you outside air temperature. Is this airplane airworthy? Let me know in the comments, and I'll answer the question in the next episode. So that's it for this episode. Next time, we're really going to be diving into... Oh, let me check my notes. What's next episode on? Sorry. Next episode is going to be the basics of lift and aircraft components. We are finally figuring out what it takes to take an airplane up into the air, or at the very least, some of the physics behind it. Now, remember, this is the basics of it. We're really going to break down kind of how wings generate lift. We're also going to talk about what wings are, all the different little doodads and boobobs that attach to the wings and the tail of the airplane. So make sure, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you get notified when that episode comes out. It should be out in a couple days. I think I try to get it out by Friday. And drop a like. Let me know what you think about this episode in the comments. I make sure I do read all of them. And if you've got any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We had that really good one at the beginning of this episode. So thanks for watching. And as always, say it with me, fly safe and keep it cheesy.